So thank you everybody for joining. I'll jump right away to introductions first so that we can start with the talk. We have three very esteemed panelists, Eddie Stern, Swami Taponidhi, and Dr. Mishra. I'll just give brief introductions about them and we'll begin. So starting with Swami Taponidhi, he's Namaste, sir. He's been living under the guidance of his guru in Bihar School of Yoga and is propagating and promoting the traditional goal of yoga. He's done a certificate course from Kantali Mitra Mandal in Mumbai and he stood for Mumbai University in 2001 on completion of his diploma in yogic studies. He also completed his Masters of Science in Applied Yoga Sciences from Bihar Yoga Bharati. Thank you, Dhanyavad sir, for joining. Briefly also introduce Dr. Sampadananda. Dr. Mishra is a professor at Rashtriya School of Public Leadership in Sonipat. He is working on very exciting project on integrating Indic knowledge and studies of Sanskrit in all the mainstream courses. He's also a mentor at Language Curry and has developed the course content for Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the second most learned language and on the app and you can learn over 170 countries. Dhanyavad sir for joining us. And then Eddie Stern. Eddie is a yoga instructor raised in New York. He studied Ashtanga Yoga and chanting philosophy under Sri R.K. Patabi from Mysore. And he's also the founder of one of the best yoga apps there could be, Yoga 365. Please try it out. Eddie is a great friend to Language Curry. He's taken various Sanskrit courses and continues to support and encourage our mission. So with that, we'll have Eddie talk first. Eddie, we'd love to hear about how yoga can also aid in mental well-being. It's established that it is a great source of emotional and mental well-being. But we'd like to discuss it more elaborately with the panel today.
Could you please? Yes. Everybody should be mute.
Yes, everybody should be on mute, or I will do that. So we'll start with Eddie. Eddie the first.
Unmute.
Eddie, you're on mute, Eddie.
One should mute, but I should unmute. Om Akandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So Anisha, thank you so much, and Swamiji and Sampadananda ji, thank you for having me with you. Happy International Yoga Day to everyone. I hope everyone's day has been wonderful so far. We're just only partway through the day in New York, and it's been amazing to see all of the participants from every part of the world connecting through yoga, regardless of the location they are, the religion they follow, the type of body they have, the capabilities they have, whether they are very fit or not very fit, or everything. So the yoga is accessible to all people, and that's never been more apparent than it is today with all the different types of entryways that there are into yoga. Though in the present time in America specifically, yoga is very much marketed as a physical exercise and a physical endeavor. We know even from the people who are doing it with the idea that they want to do something physical, that the benefits they get are profoundly more than physical benefits, that as soon as people start breathing and focusing their awareness and moving their body at the same time, they begin to see shifts in what's occurring. And part of that might perhaps be because not only, number one, because yoga works, and the purpose of yoga is, of course, this chitta vritti nirodha, but that there's a special faculty of yoga which I don't want to use too many scientific terms, but being a Westerner involved in research, I will, something called interoception, which is our ability to be aware of internal states. And one of the things that is that occurs in an outward focused world is that we're primarily concerned with outward states, with things that are affecting us and responding to the stresses of life in a way as if those stresses are real and that we need to respond to them in a way which is filled with anxiety or filled with tension or filled with uncertainty. And one of the things that yoga begins to teach us in the initial stages is that we can be responsive rather than reactive to the environmental demands that the world is placing on us. We can be still in our body, be still in our breath, and still in the mind. And then the response we have to stress, to challenge, to pain, to suffering, to disappointment begins to shift. And one of the reasons it begins to shift is that the feelings that we have in our mind of emotions are not the first things that occur in the chain of events. So the body might experience an environmental demand, and the nervous system will respond to that in a particular way. And it will be filtered through mechanisms of, say, the sense organs and the way the nervous system is communicating with different aspects. And then that's going to turn into a thought or an idea. So a thought is very far along in the chain of response to things in the world. And then associated with that thought will come a feeling or an emotion, which then we identify as real, and then we act as though it is real, and then respond to the world in that type of a way. So if someone says something which is we perceive as insulting, a word comes in, it'll come in through the ears will transmit those signals to the brain will then concoct it into the language we're familiar with, but will interpret it only through all of our conditioning. And then a thought will form based on that conditioning, and then a feeling or an emotion will arise, and we'll think, oh, this feeling that I'm having is appropriate, it's real, maybe it's a feeling of anger. And therefore, because we take it that way, then we'll respond in anger to that person or that situation. But what yoga helps us to do in the initial stages is begin to observe what's happening in our body when something uncomfortable happens, and to sit with it, to allow it to be there, to not react or respond to it, but feel the energy of it. And then the energy of that experience can begin to soften. We can see what it is, where it came from, and all the while we're connected to awareness. And this is essentially what we want to be doing in yoga anyway, to connect and feel and experience our essential awareness and live from that place. So when we do that, all of the troubles that are occurring in the mind, they become softer, and they'll still occur, but we have a practice, therefore, a strategy to deal with those things as they arise, to use awareness as the foundation of how we respond to the world. And then we can begin to deal with all the difficulties that we have in our memory, in our past, and things like that in a constructive way. So yoga for mental well-being and emotional well-being, this is one approach that many people seem to be taking these days, and a very special characteristic of yoga. Om.
Thank you, Eddie. That was very, very thought-provoking. I'd invite Swamiji now to join us.
Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Para Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you very much, Eddie. for the short introduction, and it was just appropriate because we are in today facing a situation which is bringing out all these emotions and mental turmoil. And you have said rightly that the thought that occurs is the last stage in the chain of events. But we as practitioners of yoga have the thought as the springboard of our actions and behavior. Inherent in that thought is an emotion, a feeling, likes and dislikes, intentions, convictions, beliefs, ideas. And they are all coming from within, the conditioning effect. Since the thought is guiding our behavior and action, the journey of yoga, what I believe in, is beginning with being attentive to the thought again and again, drawing the mind again and again to oneself from the sensorial impressions to start looking at one's own thoughts. The moment that starts happening, the changes start happening because you become an observer. Oh, it is my thought. The same event may create anger within somebody. The same event may create peace within somebody. A vegetable is cooked at home. One son says, I liked it. The other one says, I don't like it. The event of life is the same. That awareness part of it, that it is coming from within me, will make you delve deeper into the practice. This is one point. The other point is a very subtle point which you mentioned about the rhythms. Whenever the mind is afflicted due to external circumstances or internal circumstances, the sutras are very clear that it is accompanied by dukkha dormanasya angam chetva swasa prashwasa saha bhuva vikshepa. Swasa prashwasa, the rhythm of the breath, is the key to the rhythm of the mind. And when the rhythm of the breath is changing, it is reflecting the rhythm of the mind. Now, this rhythm of the breath gets affected not only by external circumstances, but with the rhythm of the hormones within, the enzymes within. This rhythm of the breath manifests in our physical states also. Fundamentally, what is happening is anger is an internal state. Anger is an internal state. Compassion is an internal state. What happens is the explosion at the external level. Now, at this point of time, it is the rhythm of the breath which has become arrhythmic. If that can be managed, then there is a possibility, and there is not only a possibility, that you can calm down. Because it affects the mind and the performance of the body as well. If you are in tension, then you are facing an irregular rhythm. If you are in anxiety, your breath is shallow and rapid. If you are in anger, Yes, it will be forceful and it will be short. And if you are in grief, then it will be a gasping breath. And everybody knows about depression. You will be in a sighing breath. It is a direct link. Chalevate chalam chittam. As the breath, so the mind. Now this is about the mind and the breath. Going a little bit further, the concept of the practice of yoga, beginning with the balance of Ida and Pingala, or Shat Karmas. Shat Karma, Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga. Shat Karmas tend to purify the networks, the nadis, which are having the impressions which we were talking of, known as karmas and samskaras, or archetypes. And the practice of Hatha Yoga is for balance and harmony between Ida and Pingala. The moment they become balanced and harmonious with each other, and through the practices, one is able to connect them to the chakras. That is where the opposite currents are in harmonious state, and whatever is the conditioning at that particular level of the chakra, the energy vortex will start coming out. Awareness again plays a very big key role over here, because the awareness part of it, either you commit yourself to it, act on that impression which has arisen, or you evolve that energy upwards. The external direction, the manifestation is energy has downwards and outwards. The evolution, energy is inwards and upwards. One is karma, other is kriya. We are dealing with prana. It is the pranic force which has to be awakened within us. And that will guide you to altered states of consciousness. This is what I feel. It begins with the breath, the awareness of the breath, but in totality, it is the practice of the Shat Karmas also. The mucous membranes stimulating nerves ends over there, they are directly connected to the brain centers and the chakras. If you focus over here, the nose tip, you will feel the chakra stimulated. Either security will come into place, stability, or insecurity at Muladhara. Karma will be, if you are insecure and you are acting in the external world, for security. Kriya will be, you are raising the energy upwards. You are sure, stable, and you are ready to upgrade through the Sushumna. So the path is very clear. In the field of yoga, pranas, which are the source of life. No prana, no life. Awaken the pranas. Gather them. Guide them. Awareness is the first key. And this is what I feel will take a very great step for everybody today to go away from this practice of just the physical posture. I'm not saying they are not necessary. I'm saying they are very much necessary. But with an internalization of awareness for clearing the Ida and the Pingala. They're very much necessary and essential. And then you can delve deeper within the Kundalini. Hari Om Tat Sat. I will stop over here. Namaste.
Dhanyavad Swamiji, that was very invigorating and very interesting to know how the breath changes as per the emotional well-being. So I'm sure everybody really gained from this. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Mishra. Dr. Mishra will speak for a little bit, and then we can open up for questions and interaction. Namaste, Dr. Mishra.
Agne tvam sujagrahi vayam sumhandishi mahi rakshano aprayuchan prabudhena punaskridhi Om Agnaye Swaha Idam Agnaye Idam Namama. Namaskar to all of you. So the platform is set by Eddie and Swamiji. How yoga, through its very methodized process, it helps us in bringing balance, harmonizing our entire being. And especially as Swamiji pointed out, how it harmonizes the breath, which is the most important aspect of our consciousness, of our being. Because prane sarvam pratishthitam. If prana is in a disturbed state, so everything else is disturbed. So that's why the Atharva Veda says, pranaya namo yasmin sarvam pratishthitam. So when we talk about the yoga, and especially I am practicing the yoga through Sanskrit and respecting the language Sanskrit as a language of yoga, what I have experienced, how it has helped me in the process of inner growth. That here is a language. I'm not talking about, there are plenty of things which can be spoken using any other language. But here there is a language, the very design of which, the very structure of which, the very sound of which helps us in many ways in bringing the result of what the various other methods of yoga does. Now let's see what the yoga does. What is the purpose of yoga? Now the very purpose of yoga is to, now very conveniently translate it as yoga is union. But union of what? Joining, yoke. But union with what? What to be joined with what? And in a very normal sense, we say that yes, it is the Jivatma and Paramatma yoga, the joining of Jivatma and Paramatma. Why is it that so easy? And how many actually have experienced this union of Jivatma and Paramatma, who have been really talking about yoga as the union of that? Yes, it is a realization which has been given to us, but reaching that state is an extremely difficult, it is lifetime sadhana. Many lives may pass doing that sadhana. So therefore the Gita says that yatatam sahasranam kaschit prapnoti siddhim. So even many thousands who are making that sincere efforts. So from amongst them, hardly, rarely one person gets into the siddhi. So that means the attainment of that union of Jivatma and Paramatma is not an easy thing. It needs tremendous effort from the seeker's side. Now, the yoga, but whether it is union of Jivatma or Paramatma or anything else that one reads or one interprets, but ultimately the very purpose of yoga is to liberate us from a certain state which always binds us to something which is mean, which is narrow. The purpose of yoga is to make us liberate from that and then lead us on a path towards the attainment of the Anantya, towards the attainment of the vastness and largeness. That is the true moksha, and that is the true jnanam. Now, the jnanam, that is why we say that sa vidya ya vimuktaye. So that which liberates us from our limited consciousness and then helps us attaining to the largeness and vastness of our consciousness is the true vidya. So there is a beautiful text called Yoga Kalpatruma, and the beauty of this text is that every aspect of yoga is given here using various chandas in Sanskrit. If you want to experience the yoga and understand what yoga is and the experience it through the beauty of the rhythmic language Sanskrit, turn to Yoga Kalpatruma. So there is a beautiful verse here, verse number 6, which says, Jnanam vadantiha vimoksha karanam. So they say, the yogis, the rishis say, the realized people, they say that Jnana, the knowledge, is the vimoksha karana, the cause of our liberation. Without Jnana, the liberation is not possible. But then it says, why then, even after aspiring for that Jnanam, we don't get the Jnanam? So it says, the next line in that verse is, Tajayate naiva vilola chetasi. Vilola chetasi means that jnanam never happens or never arises in the vilola chetas, in the fickle mind. If there is fickleness, if there is no steadiness, if there is no sthirata, if there is no sthita, that steadiness, then jnanam naiva jayate. Jnanam vadantiha vimoksha karanam tajayate naiva vilola chetasi. And then, if the vilola chetas cannot lead us to that knowledge, that realization where this union can take place, how to become free from that vilola chetas. The text Shabda Kalpatruma, the verse that I am referring to, in its third line it says very clearly, Laulyam na yogena vina prashamyati. This prashamana of laulya, that pacification of that chanchalata, that fickleness, is not going to happen without yoga. Tasma, therefore the last line says, Tasmat tadartham hi yateta sadhaka. Therefore a seeker of moksha, seeker of what? Seeker of moksha, the seeker who is seeking its own atma pragati, so he must yateta, he must make effort for that yoga. Yogo mukhyas tatastesham dhidarpastena nashyati. So therefore, all the mumukshus, all the seekers of liberation, for them yoga is the moksha. Yoga is that one has to get connected with oneself. Why oneself? Because we are not really connected with ourselves. We have become separated from ourselves, because this separation is the very principle of creation. God has moved from himself to become this creation. Then the creation, to realize what is its source, must get connected again with the God, and that is what is the yoga. And to do that, all that has been there in our shastras, it deals with various kinds of methods and processes, how to attain or gain back that unity of consciousness from which this fragmentation has taken place. And in attaining to that unity of consciousness, to move on that path of evolutionary progress, Sanskritam as a language helps immensely, and especially when we come to our emotional being's refinement, as Swamiji pointed out, as Eddie pointed out, the rhythm. Everything has to be rhythmic. Our physical movement, our emotional, sensational movement, the movement of the prana, the movement of the thoughts, anything that happens in the mental, psychological being, when things are tuned to that unity of consciousness, that original music, that original melody, that original rhythm, then the yoga happens. And Sanskrit is a language which is so full of rhythm that the moment one comes in contact with this language, whether someone is reading a prose passage or singing a beautiful poetry, immediately one feels a kind of elation, with that kind of, like uplift that one feels, that one's consciousness is raised merely listening to this rhythmic language, where every word, every sound is so full of rhythm. It creates that sense. It immediately harmonizes our prana. It energizes the prana, the purity of the vibration of the sound and the rhythmic vibration, I would say, purity and pure and rhythmic vibration of the sounds, the primordial sounds. It immediately energizes and purifies and then set our prana into a rhythmic mold. When we observe that while reciting few mantras or doing the japa or reading Sanskrit, practicing the Varnamala, reading any text or chanting merely, or doing the mantra yoga, doing the nada yoga, like the music, because Sanskrit is music. It's not that there is music in Sanskrit. Sanskrit itself is music, and music itself is Sanskrit. So there is no difference between this at the principle, at the fundamental level. So this is how, here is a language, use it consciously, see what it does to the whole consciousness. You can experience it. It's a matter of experience. And many people who have come in contact with this language have the same experience and will agree with me that this language has a transforming effect, or the transforming nature of its own nature is so transforming that it immediately uplifts. It makes us rise above, and it makes us feel something divine, something pure, something rhythmic, something so pure a music and so pure a vibration. So unless and until one comes, reads, and then makes it a part of one's own life, one will not understand even what we say about this language. It is not an intellectual understanding of it, but it is a matter of experiencing it. So let me, just to give you a feel, read out the verse in its rhythmic pattern. So Jnanam Vadanti Havimoksha Karanam Tajjayate Naiva Vilola Chetasi Laulyam na yogena vina prashamyate tasmat tadartham hiyate tasadhaka. So the Shastra which has been given to us using this language, and they have given it in such a rhythmic way that the essence of Shastra merely sinks into our consciousness when we try to read the Shastra through this language. That is why no translation, no interpretation in other languages can do the justice, because here the language itself is helping us, opening our consciousness and then preparing our consciousness to enter into the spirit or the essence of the Shastra. That's what is the beauty of Sanskrit. That is how Sanskrit becomes a language of yoga, because it simply prepares our consciousness to understand what is written in this language. Dhanyavad. So this is what I wanted to share, my thoughts on how Sanskrit is going to help us refining our being and then making the whole process of a sadhana of yoga easy for every one of us. Dhanyavad.
Dhanyavad, sir. That was beautiful. Always, so thought-provoking to see how Sanskrit is an aid and links yoga and binds everything together. And the knowledge of the languages opens up so much for everybody. So thank you for that. We'll open up for questions. Anybody has a question, please speak up or type in the chat box.
Hello, my name is Ayla, and I'm calling in from Seattle. And Om Namah Shivaya. Not so much a question, yet I just experienced sharing in having done yoga for many years, off and on, and then coming into Agni mantras some time ago, feeling the vibration of those Sanskritam or the bijas move the bones. Dr. Mishra, whenever you chant, I feel that vibration coming out in the chanting, and the hunger to learn more about the Sanskrit in the correct vibrational frequency, having just had a slight taste of it many years ago and feeling what it did at such a deep cellular level, in combining with the physical unwinding of the weaving of the body material, those two, it's just amazing how they can transform our being if one chooses to consciously or even unconsciously, I would say, down the path of elevating their awareness. So thank you to everyone that's here on the platform speaking today. And I don't have a question at this point. I might later, but just thank you.
That was a beautiful sharing, Ayla. And yeah, I see a question on the chat box which says that what form of Sanskrit practice does okay, I recommend to refine consciousness on a daily basis. So yeah, I would suggest in a simple way, if you can pick up few mantras, random mantras and chant it, or simply recite the Samskrita Varna Mala. So starting from A to Ha, or if that is also not possible, simply chant Aham, Soham, Hamsah. So Aham itself is a Bija mantra, so which contains all the sounds of the Varnamala starting from A to Ha. The first sound A and the last sound Ha in the Varnamala. So Adir Antina Sanyogat Ahamityeva Jayate, like Om, Aham is also a Bija mantra which one can chant to get connected with oneself, because this
It looks like Sampadananda ji has a little pause in his video there.
Yes, I think we'll just wait for 2 minutes. I think he'll be back.
Yeah. And
Eddie, you want to join, add to this?
I would, but I think Swamiji wants to add something to this first, and
Yes,
then I'll
please,
add after
please.
him.
Yes, please, Swamiji.
And the mantra for this current age is, you are muted. Swaha.
Thank you.
Okay. There you go. I unmuted myself. Yeah. So Sampadananda was just talking about the Varnamala. And if we look at Tantra, Mantra, Yantra, and Mandala is the practice. The word mantra itself means a powerful vibratory force which frees the mind of its conditionings. When the mantra is such which can free the mind of its conditionings, the mind itself, the states of the mind are in the chakras as impressions, as karmas, as samskaras. And that is where the Bij mantras have a very big role to play. In fact, the simplest mantras, Om, Kam, Cham, Tam, Tam, Pam. Then Yam, going to subtle level, Yam, Ram, Lam, Vam. They are the Bij mantras. Yam, Ram, Lam, Vam. Then going to Ham, Sham, which are the Bij mantras, the petals of the Agya chakra, and Om again. So you will be stimulating the chakras by this simple practice of Kam, Cham, Tam, Tam, Pam, Yam, Ram, Lam, Vam, Ham, Sham, and Om. And I think Sampadananda is back with us. So for me, this is a very good practice of Nada Yoga. If you want to stimulate your Vijnanmaya Kosha, okay, I will type them. If you want to go to the Vijnanmaya Kosha, stimulate the Vijnanmaya Kosha. For Anandmaya Kosha, the practices are Shat Karma, Asana, and Pranayam. For Pranmaya Kosha, the practices are Pranavidya, Chakra, Shuddhi. And this is where again the mantras can come into play. Mudras can come into play. Chakra, Shuddhi. And Kriya Yoga. For Manomaya Kosha, it is Pratyaha, Dharana, Mantra, and Yantra. For Vijnanmaya Kosha, it is Laya Yoga and Nada Yoga. They go together. Nada Yoga, setting up the vibrations within you. Laya is not just letting go, dissolving. It is dissolving and going into the next step. So you are anchored. You are not letting go only and becoming free. You are anchored to the next level of the state of consciousness. This is something which is important to understand. Then you can go to Kundalini Yoga for the Anandamaya Kosha. I will stop over here. I will let Sampadananda take over from here again, because I am an applied yogic man. I know what he is talking about. I appreciate it. I enjoy it. It is just, my heart is brimming with joy when he's talking about all these things. Thank you, Sampadananda. Please take over. Thank you. I'll mute myself.
Now that's what I wanted to share, that any aspect of Sanskrit, there are plenty of things which can be put into practice, but one can start with the Varnamala, which is the simplest way to enter into the whole spirit of the language. So yeah, I would also request Eddie to share his thoughts on how yoga and your association with Sanskrit. So how do you link it, whether you have put it into practice and then taught it some people, your students, and your views on that?
Okay, well, thank you for asking. I'd be happy to share a little of that. When I first started on a spiritual path in 1986 or 87, the first thing that I did to begin transforming my life was become a vegetarian. And that was my first entryway. And then after that, then I actually learned some chanting. And I learned some mantras from a friend of mine who had been a student of Amrit Desai. And the chanting of mantras was very transformative for my states of consciousness and started helping me to see things in my life that needed to change. And there were certain points where I had been doing so much chanting that even sometimes I would dream about the Varnamalas, and I would see that all creation was an ocean of sound. And through chanting even the aksharas, you could see the manifestation occurring. And it was only later that I started doing asanas. And when I first did them, I thought, what does this have to do with liberation at all? What does standing on your head have to do with samadhi? And but then I started to see the value of doing something constructive and deliberate, as Swamiji said, with my body for purification. But the chanting and the asanas were never two separate things. They all were part of this spiritual path. And Robert Moses, who's here now, he's the only other photo there. It says Eddie Stern, but it's actually Robert Moses. He has the beard. Was one of my first yoga teachers at the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta centers. And I did my teacher training with him in 1988. And he was the first person who showed me about puja. And also at Shivananda, we did what they would call integral yoga, where we did asanas, chanting, service, as well as meditation and vegetarian diet and all that. So there was combination of everything. Nowadays in the modern world, the asanas are very separated out from the inclusivity of all of the other practices. So I think I'm happy that I was able to learn at a time when chanting was very much considered yoga in and of itself at that point, that you could chant and you were doing yoga. You could do asanas, you were doing yoga. You could do service and you were doing yoga. You could meditate and you were doing yoga. So I see them as an integral thing. And then one last thing I'll add is that later on when I was studying in Mysore with Pattabhi Joyce, and he was teaching me some chanting of Vedas, and I was studying with Swami Taponidhi ji from Ramakrishna Mission. I started to understand that, for example, if you wanted to do Surya Namaskar, if you knew Vedic mantras, you could chant Aruna Prashna, and you were doing Surya Namaskar. And if you did not know the Vedic mantras, but you knew how to chant Aditya Hridayam, you could do that and you were doing Surya Namaskar. If you couldn't chant, then, or you didn't know how, or you didn't like it, or for whatever reasons, then you could also do the 10 or 12 movements of the different types of physical Surya Namaskar. But you needed to do those physical Surya Namaskar with breathing. And you had to breathe in the proper place because the breath powers the body of the movement of the body. In the same way, the breath powers the movement of the voice, of Vak. So the thing which is going to power asanas and the thing that is going to power the vocalization of mantras, or the thing which is going to power the ability to keep the mind focused even while doing mental repetition of mantra is prana. And so you need to harness prana in order to be able to do any of these types of things. And this is what I learned from my teachers there in Mysore.
That was beautiful sharing this.
Interesting, Eddie. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
We have a question from Ravi Dutt. I think the yoga gurus can look at it. He's asking, are yam and niyam of Ashtanga yoga hard to practice in the modern world, and how far can one incorporate it and embrace it now? So Eddie or Swamiji can take that up.
Eddie, would you like to take over? Or do you want me to?
You please go first and I'll follow you.
Okay, fine. Let us look at yamas and niyamas a little differently. Let us take them as the path of evolution. Path of evolution while interacting in life positively and constructively and creatively. Let us look at them as mature understanding in our interactions, in our interpersonal relationships, for mutual growth. Very important for mutual growth. These are the yamas. If you look at niyamas, mature understanding with oneself. You cannot go to extremes. So please look at the guidelines, look at them as guidelines and not as do's and don'ts. They have to be treated in a manner where your interactions in life become constructive, creative, positive. That which comes from within will express itself outside. They are the niyamas which are expressed outside. They also have an expressive portion of it. Just understand one thing. There is a mango orchard. The trees are mango. Every year they will give mangoes because it is the seed. What is within is manifesting as mangoes. That is the fulfillment. But we as human beings have a choice of interaction. There may be a negative interaction. We may be getting angry. And for mental and emotional management, I did mention that these are internal states. That these are internal states. And these internal states have to be managed for a positive creation in life. So it is a mature understanding which is very important and forms the key aspect of yamas and niyamas. I would like to stop over here, please.
Dr. Mishra?
No, I think you can continue, but what I feel yamas and niyamas, whether how to incorporate into this world, I mean, the present situation or present time, these are eternal values. So it doesn't depend upon this time or that time. It's a set of discipline which is given to us, you know, which emerges out of the experiences, deep realizations of the sages of the past. So it is a self-discipline which is helpful and which is universal in its nature, purifying our moral, ethical being, at the same time the mental, psychological being, the yamas and niyamas. So which should be applicable in all ages and to all people. What is needed is the attitude of accepting it and then creating that inner self-discipline in whichever condition, in whichever position we may be. Miss Eddie, to continue.
I don't think there's too much more to add. I think that that was beautiful from Swamiji and Dr. Mishra. The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi said that the yamas, and especially the yamas, were the spontaneous behavioral displays of an awakened being or a conscious person, that naturally you express those things when you are have that experience of yourself as consciousness. And I quite like that. And I heard Swamiji basically saying that, and Dr. Mishra basically saying that as well, that these are natural things that occur when we're in alignment with ourselves. And so to practice yama and niyama, to help bring ourselves into alignment. So there are two things, like yoga is a practice and yoga is a state, from what I understand. And so yama and niyama, these are also states of being, but they're also practices for those of us, you know, like me, who are not in those states. So I read a very nice thing recently that was from the, what was the name of the author? I have the book right over here. It is the Ramachandra Bhatt. And he's had a student who said to him, a Westerner, he said, how can I practice, start practicing yoga? And this guru said to him, start by just thinking about ahimsa for a few minutes every day. It's like, think about ahimsa for a few minutes every day and see what that does to transform your state of consciousness. And then maybe later, go on to think about satya for a few minutes every day. And I actually started doing that on my own, just like using each of these yamas as meditations, just thinking about them. And then all of a sudden I would find sometimes that when a situation would occur where I might habitually go into a behavior pattern, which was opposed to one of the yamas or niyamas, but specifically the yamas, that because I'd been meditating on it in a very abstract way, all of a sudden my behavior changed. Like, instead of telling a small lie or exaggerating the truth, I actually said just the truth, and I practiced honesty. Or, you know, instead of doing something that could have been harmful, even in the smallest way, all of a sudden I practiced kindness and I didn't give in to that. So somehow just meditating on them, for me, helped to transform that. So I don't have anything to add over than what these two acharyas said, but that's been my little personal experience with them so far, that they can be used as sadhanas.
Yes, so that is really beautiful, and actually I resonated with more because in the early years of sadhana, so when we started doing it, this is what was the practice. Okay, this week let's take up one aspect. So this week I will take up that I have to see that this whole week I am not getting irritated or angry by anything or anyone or anything that is happening. So similarly, put it into practice, and you'll see that the day you decide not to get angry, you will have more occasions to get angry, more opportunities to. This is where lies the challenge of sadhana, that is how to tackle it. And this is how, as you pointed out, that all the yamas and niyamas, though we know that 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, so many texts even go for the 10 yamas and 10 niyamas, but they are reduced to certain aspects. But it's all about the purification of the adhara. So adhara at all level. So which is very much necessary for attaining to anything higher. Without going through this practice of a yama and a niyama, it is extremely difficult to tap into the higher realms of consciousness. So that is why they were considered to be so fundamental and so practical for the purpose of moving ahead with any kind of sadhana.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add something. Eddie has said very nicely that he spoke the truth. What he is trying to say over here is that it is ahimsa which takes over satya.
Mm.
If the truth is it is not beneficial, then he is not to say it, because ahimsa is affected, and ahimsa is the one which takes over. It's a very subtle way of saying this thing out of his experience, but this is what stands out. And that is why it is ahimsa satya. and not the other way around.
May I ask a question of Swamiji and Dr. Mishra? Based on what you were saying, and this is something I was thinking about, but I don't know if it's the correct thinking. In the same way that we have avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhiniveshaha. And avidya is the kshetram uttaresham. It's the field for all of the other kleshas. Avidya is the field for all the following four. Do you think ahimsa is then the positive, ahimsa is the field for satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha? Do you think it follows in that same type of a way that if you have ahimsa and you fully embody it, does it take care of the others, or that wouldn't be an automatic thing the same way it happens with vidya and avidya? If the question makes sense.
Yeah, there is a truth in it, because all these are so interconnected that in ahimsa you have to have the rest of the things. Like one cannot say that I'm following ahimsa, but the rest of the things are not there. So I am a satyavadi, but I am not ahimsaka. So you cannot say that. So whether one is following the truth, he has to have the rest of the four. Whether someone is following the ahimsa, he has to have the rest of the four in that. They're so interconnected, it's very, very difficult to separate them. Yet those have been separated. They help becoming aware of many aspects of our consciousness, which needs to be purified at every level. The subtler and subtlemost level. So nothing of that remains untransformed. So that is why they're separately worked out. So then we can, complete purification of the adhara happens through this. So that is why, like all those who speak of 10, they're reduced to 5. Because the rest of the five can be incorporated into certain things. The same way, all these things can be reduced to ahimsa, as you said. Like when we say the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, so everything again is based on the dharma. So dharmika artha, dharmika kama, and dharmika. So dharma is at the base. That way one can look at it.
Okay, so as Swamiji was saying, then the 10 is reduced to 5 and the 5 is reduced to the 1. So ahimsa, according to what Swamiji was saying, if I understood you correctly, that is the base for all the others to occur?
I would put it a little differently, Eddie, over here. Your question is very particular.
Mm-hmm.
You see, each of these are dealing with creating an aura within us, and our aura affects the external dimension and environment. That is why their fruits are very different. So this has to be understood very clearly. But if you look at the niyamas, then there is one niyama which can take care of all the yamas. That is contentment. If you are discontented, you are angry and you create hinsa. If you are discontented, you are not following the path of satya. If you are discontented, you will steal, stare. If you are discontented, a ballet dancer, the moment her attention goes to the external dimension, she loses her focus because she is discontented. She wants applause. She loses the rhythm of the practice. There is brahmacharya at the base level, starting level, focusing of attention. Aparigraha is also the same way, because you are not satisfied. So contentment is one niyama which can satisfy all the yamas. But ahimsa as such, all the properties, all the benefits of the different yamas are individual and specific to that particular practice, because the aura is taking a particular form. one who has attained ahimsa, an animal comes down by his side. He is influenced by that aura, by that energy, and he becomes calm and quiet. So the attainments are different in this respect. Does it mean that the person, a truthful person, will come over here, he will start saying lies or something like that? I do not know about it. So I cannot vouch for this, that ahimsa is the base. But ahimsa takes precedence over satya. That much I know. Satyam priyat, bruyam priyat. That which is unpleasant, satya, truth, should not be mentioned. If it is hurting somebody, then ahimsa takes precedence. That was the only reflection which I wanted to give. Namaste.
That was a very helpful answer. Thank you. Very nice answer.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Eddie, for being a panelist and also posing such an invigorating question. It was wonderful. We're almost time's up. We've gone past. But I'd like to say thank you to Swamiji, Dr. Mishra, and Eddie. All three of you are such a treasure trove of knowledge. We can keep hearing and learning from all of you. And it is a beautiful realization on how the Sanskrit language and yoga together can be such a powerhouse for well-being. So thank you for your passion and your commitment, all of you. And thank you for participants for joining us. Do write to us for feedback or queries. Namo Namaha. Namaste to everybody.
Namaste.
Namaste,
Namaste, Swamiji.
namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, Sampadananda, Eddie Sternji. Thank you very much, Anisha, for inviting us.